I need a drink.
Me too.
I need a good one.
Not one of those weird ones. Like kids are
I
not.
looked out the door and I saw that.
Hi, welcome to Coffee and Questions.
With the STAR team
We're going to be pointing out a couple key points.
to a standard contract.
Episode 6. Personal property included in the purchase price. Personal property is an asset that is not permanently fixed to one location. It is a standard in the contract for appliances, ceiling fans, intercom, light fixtures, storm shutters, garage door openers, and even window treatments. They all are included in the purchase price. If any other personal property items are desired with that sale, they must be written in the blank provided on the contract.
Initial deposit. A deposit given by the buyer to the seller to show the buyer's good faith and to bind a purchase offer. The money is held in an escrow account until closing. The deposit can either accompany the offer or be made within a certain amount of days after the effective date of the contract, which is typically 3 days.
Additional deposit. In order to make an offer more attractive to the seller, there is an option to provide an additional deposit with a certain number of days after the effective date. Typically, an additional deposit is offered. It is made after the inspection period is performed and the inspection period is over.
Time for acceptance of offer and counteroffer. This is the deadline given by the buyer to the seller to respond to the offer by either acceptance or counteroffer. If the seller doesn't respond by the date indicated, the offer is no longer valid. If the deposit accompanied the offer, it is to be returned to the buyer.
Closing date. The date the title will be transferred and the money exchanges hands. Most financing offers typically offer a closing date between 30 and 60 days after the effective date.
Occupancy in possession. The clause guarantees that the closing, the seller will deliver possession of the property to the buyer and the buyer will receive the property free of any tenants and personal items.
Financing. This contingency is one of the most important clauses in the contract. The clause states that the contract is a contingent upon the buyer obtaining a written loan commitment for the specified loan type within a specified number of days after the effective date, which is usually 45 days. If the buyer is not able to secure the financing and written loan commitment, it is not received by the specified time. The buyer has a right to cancel the contract in writing at least 7 days prior to the closing date and receive a refund of the deposit. Additionally, if the loan commitment is received and the contract doesn't close due to the following reasons, the buyer is released and the deposit will be returned to the buyer. Here are some of the reasons. Seller's default, conditions of a loan that has not been met, the appraisal is not sufficient to meet the loan, terms and financial failure of the lender.
Closing costs. Outlines of the closing costs that are to be paid by the buyer and the seller.
Title evidence and insurance. The buyer must receive a title insurance commitment before the closing date, usually at least 15 days before. If the seller selects the closing agent, the seller is responsible for paying for the buyer's title insurance policy. If the buyer selects the closing agent, the buyer is responsible for paying for their title insurance policy.
Property maintenance. Seller is required to maintain the property in the condition existing as the effective date of the contract.
Property inspection and repair. This contingency is another extremely important clause on the contract. It states that the buyer has a certain number of days after the effective date, usually 15, but less if it is written to make offers more attractive, to conduct all inspections and to deliver the written inspections report to the seller the buyer has a right to request the seller to make any repairs necessary within the general repair limit specified in the contract. To bring the property up and required condition if it is necessary, repairs exceed the general repair limit. The seller can pay less, extend the buyer at closing, and the buyer can select repairs which are to be made within the general repair limit and waive those remaining repairs. Or contract may be terminated and the buyer will receive a refund of their deposit. Oh. Go.
Required conditions: the ceiling, roof, exterior and interior walls, doors, windows, and foundation must be free of leaks and damage. The pool equipment, major appliances, heating, cooling, mechanical, electrical, security, sprinklers, septic and plumbing system, seawalls, and dockage must be in working condition. Torn screens, fogged windows, and missing or damaged roof shingles or tiles must be repaired or replaced by the seller prior to closing.
Default: if the buyer doesn't perform their obligations under the contract, the seller has the right to retain the deposit. If the seller doesn't perform the obligations under the contract, the buyer will receive a return of their deposit and may seek damages from the seller by dispute resolution.
Title. The seller is required to provide evidence of good and marketable title. Title that is free and clear of any and all objectionable liens or other title defects. If the title defects are found, the seller has 30 days, the cure period, to take personable diligence efforts to remove defects. If the seller is unable to cure the title defects, the buyer has the right to terminate the contract and receive a fund of the deposit.
Time. Calendar days are used in the contract to compute time period. If any time period specified in the contract, except for the time and acceptance of offer and effective date, occurs on a weekend or National League holiday, the time period will extend to 5 p.m. on the next business day.
1.
Bye, guys! Thank you for watching episode 6 of Coffee and Questions with the Star Team. Cheers!
Hallelujah!
Yes!
Introducing you to a couple key points
to standard
Where are you
contract.
doing it? Okay, ready? Three.
It literally smells like
Something over here
chlorine.
stinks and I don't know what it is. But
Yeah,
it smells
it
like
does. No, wait, it's not. Definitely not my feet.
feet. It can.
You are almost done.
It's not stinking at all.
Oh.
Closing costs. Outlines of the
Restart. I already got.
standard conditions: the ceiling, roof, exterior, and interior. Payton.
Go! You're wasting our slime time.
Closing
Slime
costs.
time.
Payton.
Slime time.
Ugh. That was fun.
That was good. You don't need to add this.
Why am I going to do that? That's like a weirdo.
Payton.
I was trying to drink. And you First, Nia. Required
conditions: the ceiling, roof,